Good morning, everybody. So because this is the first meeting of the year, I am going to call the meeting to order. And I would like to acknowledge that the Arrowsmith Water Service Board acknowledges and recognizes the people of the Coast Salish Nations and their traditional territories upon which we gather with gratitude. The first item of business today is the election of the chair for the AWS joint venture. And pursuant to section 4.2, the management board must elect a chair from among your members based on one vote per member. At this time, I'd like to call for any nominations for the chair. Yes, Mayor O'Brien.
Thank you, CEO Kehler. I would like to nominate Councillor Scott Harrison for the position of chair of the AWS.
Okay, and Scott Harrison, are you willing to accept this nomination?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So at this time, may I call for a seconder for this nomination? Okay, thank you. And I will call the question. All those in favor of Councillor Scott Harrison being nominated as the chair for the Arrowsmith Water Service? All in favor? That is unanimous. I will very thankfully pass the speaking notes to Chair Harrison at this time.
And just for folks who don't know, we usually rotate through this position, so we're all going to be sitting here at one point. So just moving on to the next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. May I have someone to move the recommendation that the agenda be approved? Thank you, Mayor O'Brien, and seconded by Director Rogers. Are there any amendments that anyone would like to make? Seeing none, just all in favor of the agenda being approved? Thank you. Passes unanimously. Next, adoption of the minutes. So do I have a mover for the recommendation? Director Rogers, thank you. Seconded by Mayor O'Brien. All in favor? Thank you very much. That was very simple. Number 5, reports. So Ms. Holmes, if you could please present your report for the 2021 audited financial statements. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Right. Good morning. Operations update for AWS. A little bit about the history of Arrowsmith Water Service. In 1996, the city, RDN, and Qualicum Beach entered into a joint venture agreement to construct, operate, and maintain the Arrowsmith Dam. The AWS board and committee oversee the management of the dam with the city of Parksville as the operator. These slides provide an overview of the catchment areas, location of the Arrowsmith Dam, snow pillow gauge, hydrometric flow gauge, and river intake. The snow pillow is at the highest ridge at elevation 1465 meter. Arrowsmith Dam is at elevation 828.5 meter. River intake and hydrometric gauge are located in downtown along the Englishman River, approximately 30 kilometers downstream of the dam. Arrowsmith Lake level is currently at 815 meter, which is about 8 meter below our average for this time of the year. It's still very dry for us. In terms of the catchment area, the Englishman River catchment area is 391 square kilometer, while the Arrowsmith Lake catchment area is 5 square kilometer, which is about 1.3% of the overall Englishman River catchment area. Our watershed update. The snow pillow depth is currently at 200 millimeter, which is well below the average rain for this time of the year. An overview of our historical rainfall. Between August and December of last year, we were well below our average, still very dry. So this slide provides a debrief of the recent drought that was affecting the Englishman River base flow in September and October. Historically, the river base flow for August is about 0.2 to 2.4 cubic meter per second, and September ranges about 0.3 to 11 cubic meter per second, and typically seeing a rainfall starting around mid-September. However, in 2022, in June and July was filled with lots of rain. July the 23rd was the first day that water was released from the dam, and it extended into the end of October. Normally, water is released from the dam beginning of July till mid of September. And here we are going into October, releasing water into the river instead of filling our dam. September and October was very dry, and it affected the base flow. It was very abnormal seeing a base flow of 0.1 to 0.2 cubic meter per second, whereas we should be seeing 1.2 to 34.9 cubic meter per second. So Arrowsmith Dam at the time became the main supplier for the Englishman River. Completely opposite from 2021 heat dome with early heat and early rain. Our 5-year historical record of Englishman River base flow. This is a percentage comparison of the dam flow versus river base flow. The blue is the flow from Arrowsmith Dam, and the orange is the river base flow. So June, the base flow is adequate and doesn't require dam flow to supplement. July, historically, the dam flow is supplemented by a volume of 25 to 45%. And last year, it was only 6% is needed. August, 75% of the volume in the river was from the Arrowsmith Dam. In September, 91% of the volume in the river was from the Arrowsmith Dam. In October, it was about 69%, which was unexpected due to the extended dry summer. So our action during the event of September and October. In preparations for the fish migration end of August and beginning of September, we monitored the weather forecast, water supply, and water consumption. We noticed the 3rd and 4th weeks of September, rain was not in the forecast. So we contacted the province to share our information of the reservoir volume, daily flow release rate, river base flow, and our prediction and projection figures, and the unknown of the upcoming dry spell. We discussed the next step, that is water conservation measure with the province. Beginning of October, and as the reservoir volume was nearing the 25% volume mark, the province issued an order to reduce the Arrowsmith Dam release rate to 0.7 and to 0.5 cubic meter per second to preserve, protect, and prolong the available storage for the month of October. The order requires the implementations of stage 4 water restriction. The city and RDN supported the order by reducing and minimize our water drawing from the river and revert to using our well. By working closely with the province, our partner, the RDN in Qualicum Beach, and our environmental biologists, we were able to maintain an adequate water level and flow in the river for ecological system. The provisional operating rule needs to be amended, and we had our first meeting last week with the ministry and DFO. There is a slide on this, so I'll talk a little bit more later on it. So moving on to our annual operation and maintenance activity at the Arrowsmith Dam for 2022. We conducted monthly fuel inspection to meet regulatory requirements. We fill, fuel, and conduct regular genset testing exercise and activate the waterworks valve at the beginning and end of the season. We install a new sump pump for the valve chamber, install a new sign, provide site visit for the fire department as part of the safety procedure for working off the grid. Work with Mosaic to upkeep and repair road to the dam. Our 2022 projects. Lock boom repair and debris removals. The storm event last year, there was multiple atmospheric river, damaged the lock boom, allowing quite a few debris to come through and spill over the spillway. We followed the regulation requirements by notifying the province and retain a contractor to repair the lock boom. The work included replacing the chain, cut and drill new holes for the locks. The province was quite pleased with our process and approach that we took in protecting the dam when we met with them on site for the audit. The lock for the lock boom themselves need to be replaced in the near future. Our dam safety audit with the province. It is routine audit required every 5 years. The outcome of the audit, there's no major concern other than our dam emergency plan and OMS manual need to be submitted. Weekly surveillance is required here on instead of monthly. As for the dam emergency plan, we had submitted to the province and our local emergency authority for acceptance. And the OMS manual, which is the operation, maintenance, and surveillance manual, is in the work, and we hope to submit that to the province in the spring of this year. Our spending package for the camera security, communication, solar power charging station, and piezometer unit, the progress of that. So when we met with the province, they suggested to us the Starlink satellite as the communication system, which we had already purchased, and it's ready to be installed. However, they suggested to us to reach out to the other dam owner as there is newer and better technology for off-the-grid power supply. So this spending package has been put on hold until we have a chance to fully review this in depth. Our piezometer readout unit, the unit itself is purchased, received, and currently in use. So our upcoming works and projects. Provincial operating rule. The city, RDN, and Qualicum Beach staff met with the province and DFO last week to review the provisional operating order, discuss the items that need to be amended, and items that affects the watershed runoff. The next step is to retain professionals to review and determine the flow rate required for the river ecological system, review the watershed hydrology and river base flow, water consumption, and balance all that with available storage from the Arrowsmith Dam. We hope to have the study completed this year and submitted to the province to support our POR amendment. Our road use agreement with Mosaic. It is a renewal agreement, and Mosaic is in the process of drafting up the agreement, and we'll have that to us this month for review, finalize, and signature. Our hydrometric flow gauge monitoring agreement, there's not one in place, so the province reached out to us. So we're working to create an agreement. It will be a 50-50% share for operating, maintaining, and replacing the instrument. The province operate and maintain the instruments for us and DFO. Future bridge replacement at the Arrowsmith Dam. The bridge itself is nearing its service life, and replacement is required in the future. Mosaic is in the process of reviewing the structure and will provide more information when it becomes available. Our dam safety review. The work is in progress by our structural, geotechnical, and hydrotechnical engineer through Stantec Consulting. Site visit was conducted with them, with the engineer in the summer. The province gave us an extension on this one as they want our study to reflect the newer guidelines that is to be released in 2023. Thank you. And questions?
Thank you very much, Ms. Cow. That was very thorough. And I just want to clarify something. It was actually my chubby fingers which flipped 2 pages. It wasn't actually a typo. That was actually my mistake. So it's not staff. Very important when you make the mistake to not blame it on staff. Okay. So are there any questions from any members of the board? Mayor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair Harrison, and through to Ms. Cow. Thank you very much for the report again. Just a couple of questions here. You mentioned anyways that you would be proceeding with the adjustment or the log boom replacement at the dam anyways. That is obviously not an annual maintenance that you do on it. It's just as needed basis. My question is with the log boom replacement being coming, do you need any budget adjustments for it, or is that actually already included in your maintenance budget?
Through the chair, the log boom have a life expectancy of about 20 years.
Oh, well.
So it is due for replacement. It just the rainstorm last year damaged the log boom in advance. So we did fix that. The next step is to replace the log itself, and that should last another 20 years for us. So there's no real O&M required annually for that part.
So there's you have money in the budget anyways that will allow you to replace that log.
We will, once we assess what it would cost to replace the logs, we need to sort them through Mosaic. Yep.
Okay, thank you. But I also noticed that you mentioned that there's a bridge replacement also up at the dam. Whenever I hear bridge replacement, I always run for cover because I know a bridge is worth. So is that something else that we have to allocate funding for at this time, or are we a ways out on that?
We're ways out on that.
Thank you. And you also mentioned anyways, if I may, your chair, sorry, I just follow up. You were talking about the newer guidelines that are being put up by the province 2023. Could you elaborate a little bit on what is that's going to do? What's going to make them newer, or what do you anticipate changes being? Do you have any information, or do we have to wait for the province?
So the guidelines is the EGBC, Engineering Geoscientists of BC. It is a guideline. It's not an act or a regulations required. We just want to see what those are in order to incorporate. I think it's more along the process rather than the actual how to review a structural, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then that's for your the total evaluation that's going through. Stantec is conducting that right now.
Yeah.
And do you have I understand you're waiting for the new guidelines. Do you have a finished date when the Stantec report on the dam's integrity will be complete?
We're hoping 2023, hopefully the end of this year. Hopefully the end of this year. Yes, soon. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mayor O'Brien. And any other questions? Director Rogers, please.
Yeah, thanks. And through you to Heidi. With respect to the reports on the flows in the Englishman River during the summer from the dam, did those meet the requirements from the province and DFO to the extent that we were able to, and that met any requirements that were there from the province or DFO?
So what we did when we got into mid of September, October, the base flow wasn't there. So we share all our information and let the province determine what those could be. And they issue an order to reduce it to 0.5 cubic meter per second. So by that, we met the requirements that was required by the province.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Okay, just briefly, I noticed too that you did say that there's going to be increased site surveillance going from a monthly to a weekly basis. And that might be a problem owing to access in the winter months.
Yes.
So just firstly, I'm assuming that's already been included in the budget moving forward for administration. just because I know that looking around this room, there's a lot of Parksville staff here. So I just want to make sure we're not putting too heavy of a burden on. And then if it should come to pass that it's just not feasible in the winter months, would there be an alternate to having staff attend, like maybe some video cameras or something else for site inspections, or does it have to be a staff person on site?
It has to be booth on the ground, unfortunately. However, we're in the process of coming up with the plan and working with the province, as we think that weekly and monthly inspection over the winter is pose a lot of challenge for us. So we're hoping to reduce that to one over the 4 months winter.
Okay, thank you very much. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. And I think Mayor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair Harrison, and through to Ms. Cowell again. On the flow rates anyways, when we're running through the drought in the summer and so forth, once the figures were received by Department of Fisheries, were there any letters or concern by DFO concerned whether we had met the requirements as stipulated in our regulations? Was DFO alarmed? I mean, everybody knew that the drought was here. Were they satisfied that we were able to maintain sufficient flow?
The order that was issued by the province, there is a lot of consultations with DFO prior to issuing that order. So we did not receive anything further from DFO.
Thank you.
More questions? Councillor Grants, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and through to the Director of Utilities or Manager of Utilities. You mentioned in your presentation that there's negotiation or consultation occurring with the province around changing the provisional. Is that to do with the flow rate? There's going to be a slide around that. Can you give me an idea of what the objective is to that conversation with the province? What you're hoping to get out of that?
At this point, we are to retain professionals to help us with evaluating the base flow rate, water consumption, and then balance all that with our available storage from the dam. So we'll have more information and it will become available and we'll share that with the board.
And Director Rogers.
Yeah, thanks. Just a question going back again to this monthly dam inspection zone and boots on the ground approach to it. Has the city been utilizing any drones to do any reviews of the dam and take a look at it to the extent they can from that perspective, using drone technology to get in and do a close examination when the lake level is so, when the dam level is so low?
So through the chair, sorry. During the summer months, we're able to conduct our weekly or monthly inspection as required. We did ask the province, would there be any considerations to do using the helicopter drive just to fly over rather than to do boots on the ground? It's a tough sell. So what came about it is for us to come up with a plan. We do have cameras at the dam. So those are some of the measures, or it will be included in our plan to the province.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I just also add too, it's outside the purview of this board, but for those of you who sit at the RDN table, it'd be lovely to have conversations about water conservation and how to use water more efficiently. But that again is outside the purview of our board, but hopefully it's a conversation we have moving forward. All right, and I think that's it. Any further questions? Thank you so much. That was a lovely report, Ms. Cowden. I'm so sorry I got the order wrong there. My apologies.
problem.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so now it is actually Ms. Holmes to present the audited financial statements, and my apologies again to Ms. Cow.
Thanks, Amanda. Is that on? Yeah, good morning. So today I would like to go through with you the 2023 to 2027 draft financial plan for the AWS. We're going to cover some of the process around the financial plan, look at changes from the previously approved financial plan, which was the 2022 to 2026 plan, and then look at where we're sitting for this 5-year plan being 2023 to 2027 followed up by recommendations and any questions you might have on that. Thank you to Heidi for kind of setting the stage for which the financial plan falls out of that operational review. So there'll be some repeats of some of the things that Heidi has discussed with you, but looking at the cost implications on that. For your information, my report starts on page 5 of the agenda, but I think you've got copies of the slides as well. So just looking at the process around the financial plan for the joint venture, there was a new agreement signed for the AWS joint venture last June. And within that, it dictates that we need to prepare a 5-year financial plan for the joint venture. And what typically happens is that our management committee, made up of staff from the 3 municipalities, meet to review operations and preliminary numbers and look at changes that are required within the financial plan. And then we're here today where the management board reviews that financial plan. And then the last step is for each of those joint ventures to receive that at their own meetings and to incorporate that within their own 5-year financial plans. So the previous agreement only required the joint venture to prepare 1 year of forecast, which then posed problems for the joint ventures itself. So one change to the agreement in June was to actually require a 5-year financial plan for the joint venture as well, which we were already doing because the others needed it. So it's really just putting into the agreement what we were actually doing. So some changes that are noted here with respect to the previous financial plan. What you'll note, and I've noted them with stars on the slides, is that they were expenditures that were approved for 2022 that are continuing into 2023. So the amounts that are noted there have already been approved. They're not kind of incremental funds above and beyond what was in 2022. They're really just flowing through for completion in 2023. And Heidi made reference to some of those, including the dam safety review being completed, as well as that security equipment project continuing. What I will note, just for your information, is that although that requisition was approved in 2022, when it comes to our year-end accounting for that, we actually only base the requisition on actual costs. So the 2022 requisition will be reduced by the amount that's being essentially re-requisitioned in 2023. So it's not as though we're double charging the joint venturers. The actual requisition will be reduced for 2022. And you'll see that when we bring the 2022 financial statements to you later in the year. That'll kind of balance out at that point. But looking at specific changes that are different from what was approved last year, we've got some increases in wages in AWS, and that relates to some of those reviews and reports that Heidi mentioned, where we need a little bit more time to complete that and working with the province and DFO as well. Insurance, we're seeing further increases on that as well. Last year, we had about 30% increases across the board for all of the organizations that I'm involved in. This year, it's reduced in the 10 to 15% range, which again is significant for everybody. So you'll see that's gone up there. We have previously had a contingency for maintenance, whatever might come up on that, $15,000 every second year. Operationally, they're recommending that we have that contingency in each year. There's just a need for that. So you'll see that that 15,000 is coming into 2023, 25, and 27. Previously, it was in the alternate years to that. The consulting that's noted there that is new is related to the dam operating review that Heidi referenced. So there's a $25,000 budget in that. Further to one of your questions, the maintenance, wages and benefits, and equipment rental repair. We've put some dollars in there, our best guess at this point related to that increase in inspection frequency. And as Heidi mentioned, we're trying to figure out what that's going to look like, especially for the winter. Right now, we've tried to estimate, okay, if we need to rent a snowmobile a number of times to get up to the dam, that's in there. If at the end of the day, the province says we're going to be happy with one inspection over 4 months, we may see some of those costs come down, which would then be reflected in our year-end accounting. So that's what those amounts are there as well. And then that capital amount is just the continuation of the security project. Looking at the whole picture then, this is for the whole joint venture itself. In your agenda package is the specific expenditures and requisitions for each of the joint ventures, but this is in total. You'll see, though, that 2023 is still higher than most of the subsequent years. And that's just really reflective of the special projects that are happening right now with respect to various reviews, as well as that new maintenance number. 2024 to 2027, you'll see kind of evens out in a more linear fashion. But of course, there may be things that come out of the reviews this year that impact subsequent years, and we'll bring that to you as that arises. The other thing I'll point out to you is the transfer to reserves historically has been $30,000 per year. Last year, the board requested that we put aside an additional $12,000 per year into a reserve so that essentially when those dam safety reviews come up periodically, it's not a great big hit to 1 year on that. So the money would instead come out of reserves to fund those kind of blips in the operational budget. So that's why there's an increase from 30,000 to 42. Again, that was approved last year by the board. What else? I think that's all on that page. With respect to the requisitions then, I'll point out a couple things to you. One is that we've noted there what the cost sharing formulas are for each of the ventures. And the main difference there is that town of Qualicum Beach does not share in the operations costs, only in the admin and maintenance. So operations costs are based on the flow used by Parksville and the RDN. And so we adjust that, as I mentioned, at the end of the year based on actual flows, and then that would be brought to you as part of the year-end financial statements. The other thing to note, of course, is that the total requisitions need to equal the total expenditures. And so we balance out at zero, and that is the case there. Finally, there's recommendations on page 2 of your agenda. What I will note is there's actually is one small typo, and my apologies for that. But in number 3 in the agenda, it refers to recommending that the joint ventures adopt their respective portions, and it should say joint venturers. So we dropped an R there. So appreciate if in your recommendations you could note that, because it is indeed each of the joint ventures that we need to adopt their respective portions of this financial plan at their organizational level. Happy to take any questions or comments that you might have on this.
Thank you very much, Ms. Holmes. Are there any questions before we get to the recommendations? Just briefly, if I may, just sort of build on what Mayor O'Brien said. As we did have that discussion of a bridge potentially being done in the distant future, would that be something it might be wise? I mean, we do have to actually pass this in this meeting, so I don't suggest any changes, but just something to think about over the next few years, to have subsequent increases to the reserve to sort of, we know it's going to cost something, even if we don't have the exact amounts. So it's a little bit less of a hit when we do have to finally do that 5, 6, 7 years from now.
Yeah, thank you for that. We have a lot of asset management initiatives happening this year, including evaluation of replacement costs, replacement timeframes, and things like that. So I expect that by the end of this year, we'll be bringing you a report, and we have a dedicated staff member on city staff here now that is looking at all of those things and is having discussions around, yeah, when does the dam get replaced? And what is our share of any bridge replacement, given that is part of an agreement on roads? And so trying to look at not only assets that we own, but do we have obligations through agreements that we, again, need to be putting reserves aside? So thank you for that point, and I expect we'll be reporting back on that by the end of 2023.
Thank you very much, Ms. Holmes. That's an excellent answer.
Yeah.
Are there any questions at this point? Seeing none, just the first recommendation. Is there a mover for that? Mayor O'Brien, is there a seconder? Okay, Director Rogers, all in favor? And should we just do them all as a block then? Okay, let's just do 1 through 3 then as a block. 2 through 3, actually, we just moved 1. Mover for the second and third motions? Director Rogers, seconded by Mayor O'Brien, all in favor? Thank you very much. That's unanimous. Ms. Holmes, that was an excellent report. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Right, unfinished business. Woo. The reminder to turn off your cell phone, perhaps. That's okay. Unfinished business, I don't believe there is any. So I don't think there'd be anything carrying over. New business, is there any new business that members of the board would like to introduce at this time for the next meeting? Seeing none, motion to adjourn. Made by Mayor O'Brien, seconded by Director Rogers, all in favor? The meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Oh, no, it's okay.
Good morning and welcome to the January 9th, 2023 ERWS, Englishman River Water Service Board meeting. Similar to the last meeting, I need to open this meeting so that we can take care of some business. First, I would like to recognize the people of the Coast Salish First Nations and their traditional territory upon which we gather with gratitude. The first item is election of the chair to the ERWS joint venture. Pursuant to section 4.2 of the agreement, the management board must elect a chair from among your members based on one vote per member. At this time, I would like to call for any nominations for the chair of the ERWS board. Mayor O'Brien.
Thank you, Ms. Kehler. I would like to nominate Director Rogers for the position of Chair of the RWS for 2023.
Thank you. And Director Rogers, are you willing to accept this nomination?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Thank you. So at this time, I'll call for a vote among the members to confirm Director Rogers as the chair. Seconder, yes. Thank you. Okay, and all those in favor? Thank you. Director Rogers is the chair. And again, I will gladly pass the notes to him.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you for nomination as chair. So I'd like to, as chair, I'd like to call this meeting of the ERWS for 2023 to order as per Kiva's comments. So the first order of business with respect to this agenda is the approval of the agenda. So is there a mover to approve the agenda? Moved by Joel, seconded by Mayor O'Brien. Any comments, any questions? All those in favor? Carried unanimous. At this point, also the second point of business, the adoption of the minutes of the Englishman River Water Service Management Board meeting held June 9th in 2022. And those minutes should be included with your agenda. Is there a mover in favor of that? Mayor O'Brien and seconder, Joel. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. As part of this agenda, we have two reports. The first one from Heidi Chow, Manager of Utilities, English River Water Service Operations Year End Update, a verbal report. Ms. Chow.
Thank you. Our operation update for ERWS. History of the ERWS and why it was formed. Prior to the water treatment plant, the city had a river intake below the hydrometric gauge for water supply. In 2011, the city and RDN entered into a joint venture agreement to construct, operate, and maintain the water treatment plant intake works and transmission main. The ERWS board and committee oversee the management of the facility with the city of Parksville as the operator. The river intake, raw water pump station, and water treatment plant transmission main was commissioned in December of 2019. The system currently has a capacity of 16 MLD and can be upgraded in stages 24 MLD and 48 MLD. Since commissioning, approximately 70 to 75% of the water is drawn from the river source. This is an overview of this system. The water treatment plant is located at the city public works yard. River intake structure and raw water pump station is located along the Englishman River. Raw and finished water transmission main to and from the building are in blue and yellow lines there. The next slide shows the photos of the key component of the water system, which is the river intake structure, raw water pump station, transmission line, and water treatment plant facility. An overview of the water treatment plant process system. Water from the river goes through various steps and process for treatment such as sand separator, strainer, ultrafiltration, membrane system, UV disinfectant, chlorine, pH adjustment, and 2 are town reservoirs. The overall process from dam to distribution system takes about 18 hours. Coagulant is only used during winter high turbidity events. In general, about 95% of the water is turned into drinking water, and 5% is used for flushing, backwashing, membrane cleaning. 2022 updates. We complete deep cleaning of the strainer during high turbidity events, and it's occurring quite often for us. Rebuild sulfuric acid system, complete daily checks and lab works, fine tuning and optimizing the process system with our in-house SCADA engineer, Sean. Prepare and updating safety procedure, include talk to our operators, cleaning service analyzer weekly and monthly in-house, service the chemical room, organize and provide field trip and tour for our school group and community as part of our Team Water Smart program with the RDN. Due to safety procedure and protocol, some of the tasks require 3 operators, like the chemical room service, the strainer cleaning, the intake chamber cleaning as well. So this slide is our water consumption. This is percentage water consumption or share between the Parksville and RDN from the river source. Parksville monthly percentage usage is about 65 to 72%, and RDN is about 25 to 36%. It is showing a little bit higher, but it is within that 16 MOD, like the 20, it's still within the 26% of the 16 MOD. Parksville water consumption per connection, and this slides include the wells consumption. It's broken down into single family, multifamily, and commercial. Residential usage is 350 to 400 liter per unit per day, and for winter, and our summer is about 650 to 740, slightly higher than the multifamily. So in general, our summer consumption is almost twice as winter usage. RDN Nanu's Bay, water consumption per connection. It includes commercial and industrial land use, 400 to 450 liter per connection per day during the winter, and 1,000 to 1,200 liter per unit per day during the summer. Again, 2 or 2.5 twice usage in comparison to winter usage. Our 2022 projects. SCADA monitoring and programming service spending package. Our in-house engineer, Sean, worked closely with our operator to monitor, update, and optimize the SCADA process. The work included maximizing the planned runtime, increase the strainer flushing pressure, and correcting the tags in the SCADA system. Those are the ongoing works required for SCADA programming. Professional technical consultants. We retain Westburn Consultant as they specialize in Allen Bradley equipment to review the motor control system and network security. This is to outline what measures are required to protect and build redundancy to our motor control center and programming logic control system. Westburn is also a part supplier for Allen Bradley. So they will provide their inventory list to us. It's good to have them on our side when we need to expedite and get the parts to us right away. Our critical spare part, piping, valve, rebuild kits for pump analyzer, strainer, blower, compressor, you name it, were some of the many parts that were purchased this year for us. However, due to lead time and market availability, Not all the parts are available for 2022. So we're hoping to continue with that program in 2023. To give you an example, one of our waste pump tripped out or wasn't starting up. So we first contacted the supplier for troubleshooting, and thankfully we have a spare rebuild kit on our shelf. Then we contact a local vendor like Beaver Electrical and got them to pull the pump and rebuild for us. So the turnaround time for that was 3 days. If we didn't have the spare part, the lead time for that would be 4 weeks. This concept is proven to be working and reducing our downtime. Safety fence at the river intake. The work was completed by mid-island fencing in November and was completed within our allowable budget. It is needed to protect the intake structure and provide safe working environment for our workers. Our railway crossing at the Public Works Yard. The design was tendered in September and we received 3 bids. The lowest bid is NAPIT. However, additional funding is required in order to award the project to the contractor. The sectorial right-of-way for the transmission main, we submit our applications to the Island Corridor a few months ago, so we're hoping to hear back from them fairly soon. Geobec construction project. It was commissioned in May last year, and we're in the warranty period. System optimization is in progress to reduce polymer usage. The purpose of the project was to manage the waste flow from the water treatment plant. Our ongoing projects, preventative maintenance program. We retain an electrical service contractor through the RFP process last year to service the equipment as and when needed. Also, several service contractors were retained to complete a comprehensive service of the equipment, including blower, air compressors, surge tank, pump, instrument control devices, lab equipment, UV reactor, and generator automatic switch. Being the first year of the program, we made an effort to contact the manufacturer and learn from their engineer of what to expect of the equipment. And then retain their service group or retain a millwright ticket tech to service the equipment for us. The next 2 years, we hope to have the program implemented in a software or a data sheet with records to allow us to track the equipment performance better. Our water supply resiliency plan. We have been in contact with the ministry and health authority to lay the groundwork for the study. We purposely deferred the RFP for the study until RDN had completed their study for climate change and water supply best management framework. Our study for 2023-2024, we hope to focus on the resiliency and redundancy, such as how to bypass the water treatment plant, the use of the old river intake, and increase the well water productions when needed. Evaluate the source and capacity, review and update parameter and approach used in the previous study. Determine when we need to increase the in-town reservoir volume. Determine when we need to update the water treatment plant to 24 MLD and 48 MLD. Review alternative options above and beyond our 48 MLD. And look out to 50-year horizon for water supply if needed to be. Plan for drought and emergency, similar to the recent event in September and October. Our 5 years fish monitoring program. The 2022 field work is completed and the report for that work will be submitted to DFO in March. We're preparing and moving into our 2023 work with our environmental biologists. Thank you. And questions?
Any of the members have any questions? Mayor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair Rogers, and through to Heidi Cal. Great report as always. Thank you for that. Just a couple comments if I may. Regarding your critical spare parts program, I remember putting that in place a few years back anyways, when we were suggesting that this was a great way to avoid downtime. Long before any of us had ever heard of supply chain issues. We wouldn't have known what that meant, and probably something to hold the log boom together. But the thing is that here we are now, and it's proved to be very, very effective at keeping the downtime to a minimum. So thank you for that. Thank you for having the forethought to have that in place. I'm sure you have an inventory program whereby it's your parts kit that your rebuild parts kit was just used, and you order another one because it's probably going to take 6 months before it gets here. So I appreciate your forethought on that. Just to mention, one of your slides you had there, Ms. Gal, was regarding the consumption anyways, based on the residential, the commercial and so forth. There was, maybe I missed it when I was looking at the screen here. Is there actually a consumption for non-metered use, as in like irrigation, the water park by City of Parksville? You have all the numbers for all the metered, which is good, but do we know the consumption for non-metered use?
So through the chair, the unmetered, we'll look at 10 to 15%. That include the water main flushing, community parts. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just 10 to 15% of total. Is that what it is?
Total.
Okay, so all the other numbers of your meter type of thing, then we would suggest that another 10 to 15% on top of all of that is going to be the non-metered. So then when we add up all those figures, then we have every amount, every number of water usage in the city of Parksville.
Yes.
And the news, of course.
Yep.
Thank you. And then only one other question, if I may, Chair. Follow up, the RFP for your resiliency study, you were waiting for some climate change reports from the RDN,
Yep.
which is excellent. You have an anticipated date of where you'll be able to have all the figures and all your data ready to go to that RFP.
This question, if I may ask Murray, we're hoping for 2023.
Yeah, so
Yes, Ms. Walters.
we're doing a very in-depth downscale climate change study for drinking water and water protections for plan for this year, which will give us very focused climate change data for the area of the that hopefully is going to be in place by mid-year this year. A bit of a lineup. It's all do that kind of work.
You want me to repeat all that?
I heard you. I don't know how many we have out there in the audience, but it might maybe a good idea, Mr. Walters, to repeat that, please.
Okay, is it on?
You're
Okay,
good.
so through the Drinking Water and Watershed Protection Program, there's a project on the books for 2023 to do downscaled climate change analysis for the regional district of Nanaimo, the entire regional district, which will allow us to zoom in our climate change projections to a much smaller grid, down to a few hundred meters instead of a few kilometers, which will allow us to be a lot more accurate with what we're thinking about with climate change projections, particularly in the Englishman River, but all through the region. And we hope that to get that work done sometime in mid-year 2023. But there's a bit of a lineup with the consultants who are capable of doing that kind of thing.
If I may. Just to add to that, there is components of that water resiliency today that we're still moving forward with. So the pieces of the actual water treatment plant resiliency, we've already met with Vancouver Island Health, and we're looking at redundancies and replacements of that, and our ability to go around that system if there was ever some sort of catastrophic event. So there's about 6 or 7 different items of that plan. One of them is going forward with our climate change and looking at how the river has changed and how our climate has changed and how we're going to map that out. But there's several other pieces that we'll be working on while we're waiting for this study to be completed.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh.
Thank you, Chair, and through the chair to the Manager of Utilities. Thank you for your presentation. Could you elaborate a little bit on the consumption patterns in I see we've got some data here on the metered consumption, and Mayor O'Brien's already touched on the unmetered. Do we have any data on the actual output of the plant generally and how the rate of the output changes throughout the year? Because that would give an overall picture of what kind of usage there is total, right?
Through the chair. We do have information on that. It pretty much can match to this pattern between July, August, and first week of September. The peak is twice as much as our winter.
Thank you. A follow-up, if I may, Chair. Thank you. Through the chair to Ms. Chow. It's approximately double, you say, which is actually seems a little bit low, I would expect. Do we know what kind of water usage there is during the summer? Like what reasons there are for increased water usage? It comes to mind is that we would certainly have increased population during the summer months due to tourism and people coming back who maybe live during the winter somewhere else and, snowbirds, but also increased irrigation and lawn watering, all that sort of thing. Do we have a picture of what the reasons would be? And it seems to me like it would be more than double instead of just double.
Yep. Through the chair. It's more along the line of irrigations and dry in the summer that we have to keep the water. If I may ask Belinda, if you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so we've already taken out in our commercial for Parksville. We didn't have the same for Nanoose because we don't have that separate stats at this point. But when we take out the commercial pieces, that's accounting for the businesses, including our tourism businesses. So what we tried to do is look at, a single family residence versus a multifamily residence. But when you look at multifamily residences, there's less lawns, there's less irrigation that we're doing. Also, it's year to year. One of the other great stats that we have, it shows when we put conservation measures into place, when we go to level 3s and 4s, and how that changes our consumption. Those are on our website. We have lots of different profiles on our website that show a real correlation of our usage versus when we say, hey, stop watering your lawns, stop washing your cars, stop power washing your windows. Those sorts of things is a direct correlation. Of course, in our summer months too, we're filling pools, we're letting the kids run in the sprinkler. There's lots of different reasons for that, but most of them are user controlled. So when we're talking about looking at ways of having more water systems, and should we have another dam, or should we look at reservoir levels and those sorts of things, we also have to look at our conservation methods, because those are the things that we can do instantaneously. It costs us no money compared to building other infrastructures. And I know that the RDN already has a great water conservation program. And we didn't include it in the water resiliency study because that's for each city or district to do on their own. But the city of Parksville is going to be tagging into some of that information and helping to roll out some of those pieces to our community as well.
Okay. Thank you. Any further questions? I guess I might just for myself to Mr. Walters. When we look at the information here with respect to single family, multifamily, commercial and so on, do we have that same information? Okay. That's on the wells. I'm just wondering what we would have, or if you have any comment with respect to the Nanoose consumption.
Yeah, so in the news, we have about 2,500 connections on our water system. And of that, we have about 50 that are non-residential. So because we have such a small number of commercial industrial, we don't typically separate those numbers. However, we have 1 or 2 quasi-industrial users that use an enormous amount of water that I think is going to motivate us to split them out of our stats in coming years so we can actually better track the residential usage.
Thank you. So if I might just ask, when we look at this, from last year's, the minutes from last year's meeting with respect to the motion, they're made by Director Wallace, that the ERW Board direct City Parksville includes part of the 22 water resilience study, a review and update of the assumptions made with respect to climate change, population growth, and per capita water usage. So is it that the board expect to receive something later on this year that would capture all of those requests or directions that were in that motion?
If I may, yes, we will include those information in our report.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I have a follow-up question on that topic. I wasn't on the board at the time, so I'm not fully familiar with the terms of reference on that motion, but so through the chair, is it going to contemplate projections of anticipated rainfall patterns based on current available climate modeling? So we know what we've actually got potentially to work with in terms of water?
To the chair, yes, it will include the climate change and the patterns, the forecasts or the rain patterns.
Thank you. Any other?
Great, thank you very much. So we'll walk through the ERWS financial plan for 2023 to 2027. Again, similar to our last presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about the process changes that we're proposing as compared to last year's 5-year financial plan, looking at the actual draft 5-year financial plan, and then 3 recommendations, as you mentioned. Heidi has gone through a number of these items that you'll see reflected in the financial plans. So there may be a little bit of repeat information, but looking at the cost implications of some of those items that she discussed. Similar to the AWS, we did have a new joint venture agreement with the ERWS that was signed last June, which dictates that we need to prepare a 5-year financial plan for the ERWS. So the management committee, being staff from Parksville and RDN in this case, meet to review operations and what impacts we'll have to the 5-year financial plan, and looking forward at long-term financial planning on that as well. The management board today will review that financial plan, and then what the recommendation asks is that you then take those 5-year financial plans back to your respective organizations and adopt those within your 5-year financial plan to meet community charter requirements in that regard. As mentioned previously, the previous agreement only required 1 year of financial plan, but we've always prepared the 5 years, and that's what's presented here. Okay, looking at some of the changes, we've got a number of items, as Heidi mentioned, projects that were approved in 2022 but are continuing into 2023, and I've marked those with a star. In ERWS, those actually total about $302,000. And so those are not necessarily an increase from the prior year, but really just carrying those forward. And the 2022 requisition for each of the joint ventures will be adjusted in the year-end accounting. We see here another increase in insurance premiums from the prior year. We had about a 30% increase last year. We're seeing a further increase again this year. The number is actually a little higher than it would have been otherwise, because last year we were under budget a little bit. It was even higher than we had expected. So this adjustment here reflects a little bit of the adjustment to last year, as well as what we're seeing is about a 15% this year in the insurance premiums. Again, that's consistent across other organizations that I'm seeing. Aon is our insurance agent. they're out there trying to find different insurers and I think the bottom line is that it's just a tough market right now and we're seeing increases across the board on that. Looking at the operations and maintenance, we're into the 4th year of the operation of the water treatment plant. And still, as Heidi mentioned, working through what is the optimized kind of levels for staffing, for supplies, for maintenance, and all of these efforts. So what we see in this year's adjustments is just a right sizing of those wages and staffing levels, and really looking at what is the cost of 3 dedicated staff members at the water treatment plant, where previously we'd had some ins and outs of City of Parksville water staff. And so what we're looking at is really what are the 3 dedicated plus pager pay, as well as an adjustment that we're estimating right now based on the collective agreement, which is coming up this year. It expired at the end of 2022. So we've got an assumption of an increase in here based on what we're seeing at neighboring municipalities. So we're hoping that this is getting closer to the right sizing on that staffing. We've also got some additional costs 2024 to 2027 related to the SCADA monitoring. That's a critical item for the water treatment plant. And operationally, we're expecting that the need for the expertise in that area will continue. So we've added some forecasted amounts in those 4 years. Parts and materials, we see an increase of about 30,000 plus some inflationary adjustments across the board. A significant increase in chemical costs, especially all chemicals. And again, that's a critical input into the water treatment plant. So just trying to give us a best guess on what the impact of that is going forward. As you are well aware, inflationary and supply chain issues continue. And so that's reflective of that there. The preventative maintenance program continues. And what we've done here is, I don't have a star on this one just because it wasn't in 2023, but that 2024 amount is really an amount that was remaining in 2022. We know that there was enough money in 2023 and that the program would be continuing into 2024. So that's at $50,000 in 2024, again, previously approved in 2022. The final item there on the maintenance side is the geobag replacement. As Heidi mentioned, those are operational now, but what we're finding is that the estimated replacement frequency and cost of those, we needed to bump up the estimate that we had last year. So that's that $10,000. Again, as that's a new kind of operation, we'll adjust that as needed going forward and may bring you back changes on that as we become more familiar with the operation of that. Looking ahead then at some of the kind of minor capital and capital items, Heidi did make reference to the railway crossing and the need for further funding on that. And as she mentioned, they did go to RFP in the fall. There was an estimate of about $110,000 in the 2022 financial plan. Best guess at that point. Of course, when those proposals came in, they were very, very significantly higher than what we expected. And the total cost is going to be closer to $290,000. So on the next page will be a specific item related to that. But certainly there was an amount in 2022 with a best forecast at that time. But as Heidi mentioned, we did get 3 proposals on that, and that was the lowest. And so we are looking to include that in this financial plan for the railway crossing. Again, we've got some projects carrying forward here that were approved in 2022 related to the water resiliency and the geobag project, just the completion of that. The other item that we've got here is the transfer to reserves, and the board last year approved $100,000 transfer to reserves per year. Just looking at operationally what's been happening, looking at costs to replace and some of the asset management initiatives that we're already working on, we know already that that amount is likely low. And so what staff are recommending is that the board consider increasing that to a total of $200,000 per year. Just looking ahead at replacement of water treatment plant components themselves, as well as potential enlargement of the plant at some point. So that increase there is in addition to the 100,000 that is already in the previous financial plan. Finally, there's a capital contingency amount. Again, as we're in our 4th year of operation of the water treatment plant and starting to see what types of components need replacement and when, staff is recommending an additional capital contingency of $70,000 per year, which would bring us to a total of $120,000 contingency for capital and equipment replacement and things that may arise. And so that's that change from the prior year, at which point a $50,000 contingency was approved last year. So that's an incremental amount, again, just based on what our operating staff and Director Woods are seeing is needed after another year's operation under their belt of the water treatment plant. Finally, this is a new item for 2023, although it was essentially partially included last year. I'm highlighting it as new because it is a very significant increase over the prior year and clearly not expecting proposals to come in that high. So the incremental cost on that being another $235,000 on the railway crossing related to those RFPs. So again, I think we do have RFPs and proposals in hand on that. And so the cost estimate should be quite good, but it is, of course, significantly higher than we expected or hoped. Looking then at the total picture, reflecting all of those changes, we see an increase so looking at 2023 here as compared to what 2023 was in 2022 to 2026 financial plan, there's about an $890,000 increase. What I would note of that is that more than $300,000 of it is amounts that are just carrying forward. So we're already approved. The remainder of the increase is really half of that being the railway crossing increase. And then that incremental amount that we're recommending on the transfer to reserves of 100,000, and then about 100,000 in right sizing the wages and best estimates for what that looks like. Again, a full year with the correct staffing in there from Director Wood's perspective, as well as increasing the contingency on the equipment replacement of 70,000, and then just that increased cost for materials and supplies. So there's nothing really kind of way out there. It's just a reflection of what we're seeing in the market and giving you our best forecasts of what we think those costs will be. As I noted previously, of course, the 2022 requisition will be reduced to actuals based on what was actually spent in the year. And this year's requisition is higher than it would have been. So those kind of balance out, and you'll see that accounting reflected in the year-end financial statements. Of course, the total requisition from the 2 joint venture partners has to equal the total expenditures to come to a net zero, and it does in this case. There's 3 recommendations. Again, this one has the spelling correctly. So what we recommend is that if the board approves the financial plan, that they then take that back to their individual municipalities, local governments to have that included in their 5-year financial plans as required by the community charter. I'm happy to take any questions that you may have on any of those slides.
And thanks very much, Ms. Holmes, for excellent report. Although it's a bit staggering, I guess, when we look at it. So the impact is $890,000 basically on the changes.
Yeah,
But
really,
about 300,000 of that is,
right.
so you're looking at a $500,000 change in the request. Okay, thank you. Any questions? Mayor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair Roger.
And Ms. Chow.
To the chair. The bulk of the
increased costs came from tree removal, substantial tree removal in order to gain that site for the railway. So it was about 70,000 more than we expected for the tree clearing portion of it.
Where is the railway crossing? Whereabouts is the railway crossing?
It's at the Public Works Yard. It's the crossing to to get to the intake structure.
No, it's actually right beside where the geo bikes. Remember when we walked down, to the treatment plant, or sorry, to the intake? You had to cross the railway tracks. It's right at the works yard. And I mean, it's regulatory requirements of sight lines and those sorts of things that, I mean, of course, we didn't know about until we had somebody come out and tell us, you know, what has to be done. And it's significantly higher than we had hoped for or had even thought about, and as well as the folks that we had talked to originally. It's unfortunately, this is one of those things that we can't not do because we have to have that right of way and we have to have the ability to cross, or we won't be able to get down to the intake structure.
Follow up if I may.
Yes, sir.
So I understand the tree removal somewhat, not really, but I understand them asking for it. But is it, I talk about rebedding the actual railway crossing right at that I'm familiar with the area of it. Like rebedding the whole thing as well, like lifting the railway lines type of thing, and as well as replacing all the ties and so forth?
Yes, because we have to change it. Like currently, it's just a temporary crossing, and we have to make it a permanent crossing that follows all of the regulatory requirements for trains to be able to now go on that area. So it requires all of the things that you just mentioned and then some.
I'm having a real hard time justifying building a trail bed and railway crossing to standards for a non-existing railway system. And I'm having a real hard time with that. It's also, as well as I have a hard time with every time we have to pay the crossings across our highways and so forth. We have to pay that annual fee that we tried not paying for a few years ago. And yet this Island Corridor Foundation continues to lead the taxpayers into maintaining a railway bed for non-existing trains. I would be more apt to maintain it if and when they have a railway system that's up and running. Is there any recourse we have to dispute this amount? And if it's not at the Island Corridor Foundation, would it be with the province of BC? Because this, by the time we can rebed this whole thing and pay $235,000 and it's not going to get done, maybe the population won't grow enough for another 20 years. By the time the population grows, and they might actually get a corridor foundation actually running trains, we'll have to replace it all because it'll be rotten by then. So the thing is that this is not good money spent in my estimation, and I'm just tired of being fleeced and nobody taking exception to it. I'm not in no criticism of staff. I know you're following regulations, but at the same time, this to me is just a money grab. And the thing is that, as Mr. Rogers pointed out, we already have higher than expected budget requirements here just to maintain our system, and to have this thrown at us. It seems I would like to take that $235,000 and spend it a lot more efficiently to provide safe drinking water for our people. So I'm having difficulty.
Through the chair, we did ask the same questions to ICF and SBI. Unfortunately, for their guidelines, there is not one standard that allow us to cross with just building the crossing with gravel. And so we have to do the additional work to meet to the standard, to the railway standards. which is the apron, the asphalt apron approaching the crossing, the tie crossing. Those are the additional costs that incur.
As a follow-up, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's not lost on me as well, the fact that we have $70,000 worth of tree removal to make sure that we have sight lines for our non-existing railway to make sure that they don't hit anything when the train is not running. So we're taking $70,000 worth of trees. I'm sorry, I just happen to like trees and I recognize their impact on carbon reduction in our area to greenhouse gases, etc. And so we're going to knock down $70,000 worth of trees. Just take them out of what we're going to try and improve with our urban tree strategy to improve the canopy in Parksville. And here we are taking $70,000 for no bloody reason at all, quite frankly. So I'm having a little bit of hard time that we're just following somebody else's requirements. That, you know, it makes as much sense as we got to make sure that we have the requirements in place for Tyrannosaurus Rex crossing the road, and we got to make sure the bridges are high enough. Well, I don't think we have to do that anymore. So maybe we should just question it. I'm sorry. I think that there has to be some recourse here. This is just insanity, folks. I'm sorry. My taxpayers do not have limitless pockets, and I believe that it's up to us to try and keep those costs down.
If I may, through the chair, it's a regulatory requirement of the railway for us to have, and it's no different than the motor vehicle act. There's things that you have to have in place. Staff doesn't have the ability to change those regulatory requirements and to get our right-of-way agreements completed. This is one of the big pieces that we need to have completed. So as always, we take direction from the board, but staff is a little bit limited on how we can mitigate this situation. We've tried a whole bunch of different other options and ideas, and we're still pretty much coming up against what the regulatory requirements are for a railway crossing.
Mayor O'Brien, and then Joe.
If I may, as a follow-up, would it be appropriate at this time to make a proposal motion anyways to allow the board members of the ERWS to approach the regulatory authorities with a question to see if there can be some relaxation to this requirement or board members actually meeting with our local authorities, with maybe our local MLA and so forth, something to that effect. Would that be appropriate at this time? Do you think that, or can you just go on word that as soon as I get out of this meeting, I'm going to be on the phone to someone, which I will. But the thing is that I maybe should have official blessing by the board that that's what I should be doing. Maybe the chair would like to add into that too, because
No,
no.
the CEO.
If I may, through the chair, yes, we could certainly, I think it would be very helpful for us to have the board's direction to do that. And we could certainly separate this item out. And, you know, we've been, I would say frankly, struggling a little bit with this on our end because we have zero authority or ability to ask for anything. We did, as Chair O'Brien, or sorry, Mayor O'Brien mentioned before, we did get some advice on the regulatory requirements through the board and for the city as well. And I think it is just, we're kind of caught in a strange situation in that while this doesn't appear to be a railway to all of us out there, there are some people who maintain that it is. And we have to follow the rules that kind of don't, it's almost like a one-off. It doesn't really make sense. So I think it would certainly be appropriate for staff to get direction from the board to follow up. It is a number of different agencies, but I think we can sort that out. But if the motion is just as Mayor O'Brien mentioned, just to pursue this with the appropriate provincial and federal agencies, we can certainly set that up and arrange for this board to meet with whoever it is you need to meet with. We can make that happen.
Could I also suggest that if the board is not comfortable with approving that part of the budget, that we could approve the financial plan without that amount? And then as we move forward, the board could give specific direction on the approval of whatever amount or item, just so that the operations are not kind of held up by the non-approval of the balance of the financial plan. Is that clear?
That makes sense. I would be satisfied with that recommendation.
Yeah, I think that's something that we could do, but just a couple of questions, if I might. In your discussions with Island Corridor Foundation, did you have any discussions at a staff level relative to whether or not this could be delayed by a year or two? And I'm just wondering, what impact is it having on the operations at the plant and at the intake with respect to being able to use that crossing on a regular basis? Because I think we have to assume that you've got staff or people having to go down to the intake, from the treatment plant and so on an almost daily basis. And I'm wondering whether you have consulted anybody with respect to our liability with having that crossing meet national, and they are federal requirements with respect to the railway crossings and so on.
So, there is a temporary crossing that we have been using. However, that temporary crossing wouldn't allow us to make the turn. We have to make a whole bunch of back and forth in order to complete the turn. So in terms of delaying the project, I have to reach out to ICF and SBI. That was part of the process in order for them to approve the SRW for the transmission main for us.
Thank you. I'm going to go a little less formal. Kiva.
Thank you. If I may, through the chair, so we do not formally have that motion that we just discussed. So if the board wants to move forward, we would need a mover and a seconder for that motion to approach the appropriate federal and provincial authorities to discuss options for a reduced cost crossing. And also perhaps a second motion then that would recognize this item coming out, but the rest of the items proceeding for consideration of recommendation to the joint venturers.
Okay, thank you. Is that a motion that you would like to make?
I'm
Mayor
prepared,
O'Brien?
I'm prepared to make that motion at this time, Chair.
Is there a second? Joel? So any discussion?
By pulling it out two ways, we can still approve the rest of the budget anyways as presented by pulling the 235,000 out. And obviously, if we have to put it back in again after we have discussions, then we can do that. So I think that that's the most prudent way, but I certainly want to have the ability to ask that question. And it doesn't make sense to approve 235 at this time until we have that question answered. So I think this is a good move to have some discussion, a little more detail as to if what we have come up with an estimate anyways, even if we have the amount lessened by ICF to maybe we don't have to do all of the suggestions like sightlines and so forth at this particular time, just making it safer. But the thing is that I think this is a good step. Thank you.
Joel?
Through the chair to the board. I am supportive of this motion, having seconded as well. The question is this 235,000 plus the 55,000 that had already been allocated? Is that on the table as well? Maybe that's a question through to the Director of Finance.
I would probably look to, yes, it's both amounts. Do we have any costs that must be incurred related to anything we're doing already in 2023 related to that? No, it's all part and parcel of the 55 and the 235. So it'd be 290,000 that we would want to put aside for now from the financial plan.
So that's with respect to the one motion when we get to the financial plan, because the motion now is the motion with respect to addressing the issue with other levels, senior levels of government, or with the Island Corridor Foundation. I understand it. That is the motion that's on the table now.
Yes, that is a motion, Chair, separating out the first part is what Keith had mentioned anyways, so to have the discussion. And then we can talk about Mr. Councilor Grant's numbers regarding, which is very well brought up. Thank you, because I just see that as well. 55,000, 235 is what it is. And then so 285. So we're talking $300,000. Yeah, not just the 235 that are bandy and about was abandoned. So, so 300,000 is the number we're talking about. So let's talk about that in the second part of this motion. I certainly approve that. Thank you.
And I think Ms. Holmes referenced 290, which is the 235 plus the 55 is 290, not 300. But we're within, to keep the numbers within the financial plan clear. So we have a motion on the table now with respect to addressing the issue of the railway crossing with senior levels of government and Island Corridor Foundation. See whether or not that's necessary or whether it's any opportunity. Okay.
So if I may, yeah, so my only question around this specific motion then is whether we've sufficiently protected ourselves if there are any safety concerns or if we create any additional challenges to accessing the works yard across the rail line. You mentioned, so the manager of utilities mentioned the difficulty maybe in accessing that. Is this delaying this? Is this going to be a big burden on the staff, or is this something that is worth it in the scheme of things, in your opinion, if I may ask?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's worth it for us to proceed with this. If the railway is not running, why are we spending all this money into the infrastructure that we don't need?
I'm sorry, I could not hear your response.
It's worth to look into it. I mean, we try our best on our side to ask ICF. So I think the next thing to do is ask senior level of government. It's no point spending money into something that we may not need. So in the meantime, we will make do what we can with the temporary access.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And given that, then I'm definitely supportive and almost would like to make this entire outlay of money contingent on the ICF actually maintaining their own rail line, which from all I can tell, it looks like it's very much fallen into disrepair. And they aren't even dealing with invasive species along their rail line at this time, as far as I can tell, at least along the Parksville part of the corridor.
Okay. Thank you. And I guess not to belabor the point, but I would ask a question. So you're confident that this will not impact our ability to access the intake and so on, and for direct transportation for both for staff and for vehicles and equipment and parts and supplies down to the intake, and for servicing anything we might have to do with the Englishman at that point? Okay, thanks very much. Any more comments or questions on the motion? All those in favor? Those opposed? None of us, because we all unanimous. Thank you. That motion's carried. Now, with respect to the recommendations on the 2023 to 2027 financial plan, the report from the Englishman River Water Service Management Committee dated January 4th, 2023, entitled Englishman River Water Service, RWS 2023 to 27 be received. Is there a motion in favor of that?
Point of order question for the chair. Will we be moving the entire 3 points or doing them
No,
individually?
just on the one.
I'll
have a
move
report
the
to have it
first. Yeah, I'll move to
received.
receive.
Or seconder? And seconded. All those in favor? I think that's carried. So that motion has been received. The Englishman River Water Service Management Board approved the ERWS 2023-2027 financial plan attached as Schedule A. Is there an amendment to that? Mayor O'Brien.
I would like to make an amendment to with remove the capital costs estimate of $290,000 out of the presentation.
So does that
And,
identify,
and to approve the rest of it with that removed. Or do you want it separate?
I would suggest a motion that says that 290 with respect to railway crossing be removed.
Yes, that's exactly it. That would be fine.
And seconder. So any other discussion on that? I think we've had a good go around on it.
Right.
Okay. All those in favor? Any opposed? There's none opposed. It's carried unanimously. And number 3, that the Englishman River Water Service Management Board recommends the joint ventures adopt their respective portions of the ERWS 2023-2027 financial plan. And I'm going to add in there as amended. Attached as Schedule B, Parksville, and Schedule C, RDN. The motion for them. Moved by Joel, seconded by Mayor O'Brien. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That motion is carried unanimously. Is there any unfinished business? Seeing none? Any new business? Special business? Pursuant to section 90-1 of the Community Charter, council proceed, not council, but this board, management board, proceed to a closed meeting to consider an item relating to the receipt of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege. Is there a motion to do that? Joel, seconded by Mayor O'Brien. All those in favor, move into in camera. That motion is carried.